My name is Tony Rapley, and I work with SGI in Traffic Safety Community Outreach. Today, I'm going to be talking to you, the grade 9s, for your safety fair for RDIEC. What I'm going to be discussing is the importance of knowing the rules for the road when it comes to impaired and distracted driving. Although none of you have your license yet, it's important to know these rules before you're in driver's education and before you get behind the wheel, just so you understand what you're getting yourselves into. Impaired driving is the first section that we're going to talk about. Over the years, SGI has spent a lot of time doing different commercials and advertisements to raise awareness about the concerns with impaired driving and how to encourage people to make safe driving decisions. Be a Good Wingman, the logo that you can see on the screen right now, is one of our really popular commercials and ads that's all over the province. The whole point of being a good wingman is that friends don't let other friends drink and drive. Knock on the Door is also another really common commercial that people have seen. And what is unique about the Knock on the Door commercials and advertisements is that different law enforcement and first responders were interviewed, and they shared their stories about experiences they have had when they've had to go to crash sites or even deal with someone who's been impaired while driving. You can take some time to go onto YouTube and search SGI Be a Good Wingman and SGI Knock on the Door if you wanted to see those commercials. Impaired driving. One of the really important things is to understand how alcohol affects our bodies and in turn, how that is going to affect our ability to drive safely. When it comes to impaired driving, a really important terminology is going to be BAC. What does BAC stand for? Blood alcohol content. A person's blood alcohol content is the amount of alcohol running through their bloodstream at any given time. There are a lot of things that affect what a person's BAC level is going to be, and depending on what your BAC level is, you're going to have different consequences when you are pulled over by law enforcement. When it comes to impaired driving, it's also really something to keep in mind, something of importance, that it's not just alcohol impairment that impaired driving deals with. Impairment is also when someone is impaired by drugs too. So back to BAC, blood alcohol content. The average person's body will filter 1 ounce of alcohol through their bloodstream at any given time. What we say is 1 ounce per hour. This is just an estimate. It's not set in stone math, and there's a lot of things that affect this. So I know being in grade 9, none of you are the legal drinking age, but let's just play a game of pretend or hypotheticals. When we think of 1 ounce per hour, the whole purpose is that you should be conscious as someone drinking how much alcohol you're putting in your body and how much time you are giving that alcohol to filter out of your body. But when people go to a party, what they will typically do is they'll bring their alcohol and they'll bring something to mix it with. They'll free pour it into a cup. They'll drink that cup, and once that cup is empty, what are they going to do? Typically, they'll just make another drink, they'll finish that drink, and the cycle continues. Before you know it, in the span of that one evening, you could have had 10 ounces of alcohol in your body. So technically, that means that you're supposed to give yourself how long to filter all of that alcohol out? 10 ounces, 10 hours. Now, how many of you think that you would actually wait 10 hours before doing anything, let alone getting behind the wheel? Probably not many, and that's when we run into problems. With 1 ounce per hour, the things that affect how fast alcohol is processed out of our body are things such as being male or female. Women tend to feel the effect of alcohol sooner than men just because of the hormones in our bodies. Something else that affects 1 ounce per hour is going to be whether I am someone who is tall and slender, someone who is muscular, or someone who is not either of those. Our body fat ratio also affects how fast alcohol is processed out of our body and what we have eaten that day, the kind of medication that we may be taking, and how often we drink. If you are someone that drinks every single weekend to the point where you're blackout drunk and you're going shot for shot against someone who's never had alcohol at all, obviously, the person who's never had alcohol at all is going to feel the effect of the alcohol sooner. But just because I'm feeling the effect of the alcohol sooner doesn't mean that there is any more or less alcohol in my body than someone else's. A person's blood alcohol content is really personalized to who they are. So, because of that, you can't compare your situation and how much you've had to drink to someone else's situation and how much they have had to drink. When it also comes to impaired driving, it's important to note the fact that impaired and drunk are two terms that are commonly confused. When someone is impaired, they're taking a substance that is going to alter their body's ability to function normally. Impairment starts from as soon as you consume another substance. When you're drunk, you're showing the effects of your impairment. You can be impaired and still be able to talk, have a good conversation, and wave your hand, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a high BAC level. Some people are able to do those things and still have a high BAC level, and they think that they're okay. They get behind the wheel, and then there's some serious consequences. How do they know that I'm drunk? The they that we're talking about is obviously police. So the police will do 3 common tests to see if a person is impaired by alcohol or drugs. The first being an SFST, Standardized Field Sobriety Test. An SFST is going to test your basic motor responsive skills. They're not going to ask you to solve big Einstein equations. They're not going to ask you to say the alphabet backwards. And they're not going to ask you to do some complex dance routine. In an SFST, the police are going to ask you to do things like take your finger, touch the tip of your nose. The police will ask you to pick things up. They will ask you to walk a straight line or balance, show that you can balance yourself on one foot. The whole purpose is if you were sober, these are things that you could naturally do. But being impaired, your body automatically reacts differently to doing basic skills. And the SFST is going to see if you can do those basic skills, which a sober person could do, but you can't do because you're obviously impaired. The second kind of test is a breathalyzer. Breathalyzers are super common. It's a simple pass or fail when it comes to roadside, depending on if you're a new driver or an experienced driver. As a new driver, your BAC level is allowed to be 0. That means 0 tolerance, no amount of alcohol in your bloodstream. So when you do a breathalyzer, if there's alcohol in your bloodstream when you're blowing out into this device, you would fail. Then the police will take you into their custody, back to the detachment, and give you a more detailed breathalyzer. The detailed breathalyzer is going to tell them exactly what your BAC level is. Therefore, they know how to charge you. If it's a little alcohol, then your consequences are severe, but not as bad as if it's a lot of alcohol. Then that's when you would have a criminal charge and a criminal record. We'll get into that a little later. A DRE has nothing to do with Dr. Dre, has nothing to do with rap. A DRE is a drug recognition expert. These are police officers that go away for special training, and when they come back, they're able to identify when someone has consumed different drugs. This is really important because it brings us to the point of marijuana. In Canada, marijuana usage may be legalized, but it's not legal to use when you're going to get behind the wheel. So it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter whether it's legal or not. You are not allowed to smoke a joint before driving. You are not allowed to sit in your car while your friends are hotboxing and smoking. And there's no excuse to say to the police, oh, I wasn't the person smoking, they were. Marijuana usage, although legal, is not okay before you're about to drive. or worse, during your drive. DREs can tell if someone has been under the influence of hard drugs such as cocaine, crystal meth, almost anything under the sun, essentially. They spend lots of time doing the training and they know what to look for in your body's response. Always remember that when it comes to impaired driving, it's not just alcohol. Drugs are included. Now let's talk about some myths. Commonly when I go to high schools, one of the things I ask is, if you guys were to be drinking, not that any of you are, totally hypothetical, what are some things you have heard or some things that you have tried to sober yourselves up quicker? And you would be very surprised with some of the answers that I get. A lot of times people talk about drinking coffee, drinking water, eating a whole loaf of bread, or really eating anything greasy. People will talk about running around a building, taking a cold shower, or even making themselves throw up. So I'm going to be the person to give you some bad news. None of that stuff is going to actually affect your blood alcohol content. Let's do some myth busting. Food is one of the most common myths that I have heard. So when it comes to drinking water or drinking coffee, there are some situations where you've been drinking or you're under the influence of drugs and you start to get tired. So when you have water or coffee, it hydrates you and makes you more alert. However, that doesn't actually affect the alcohol in your bloodstream. Instead of being the tired drunk person, now you're just going to be the more alert, more annoying drunk person. Food. When it comes to food, there is some truth in the fact that if you have a lot of bread in your stomach before you're drinking, some of the alcohol will get absorbed in the bread. However, once the alcohol is already in your bloodstream, there's nothing that food can do to remove it from your bloodstream. Throwing up. Again, because the alcohol is in your bloodstream, throwing up is only going to affect what's in your stomach. And therefore, it doesn't actually help you. You just feel a bit better, but you're not going to actually be any more sober. I've also heard some people say drinking pickle juice, putting a dirty penny underneath their tongue. None of that stuff actually affects your bloodstream. Really and truly, your best and only solution is time. Give yourself enough time. Work with the 1 ounce per hour rule. Be responsible if you are going to be drinking. When it comes to time, keep in mind that when you're sleeping, your heart rate and your breathing slows down, so it actually takes a little longer for the alcohol to process out of your body. So if you've had 5 shots of alcohol and you pass out for 5 hours, yes, you're filtering alcohol out of your body. Yes, when you wake up, you'll feel a bit better, but that doesn't mean that you're completely sober. Give yourself time. Now, what happens if I don't make the smart choices? What happens if I don't give myself the proper amount of time? I don't sleep at a friend's house and I make the decision just to get behind the wheel anyway? Well, let's talk about that. You are considered a new driver until you are 22 years old. Even though the drinking age in Saskatchewan is 19, you still are not allowed to consume any alcohol before driving until you are 22 years old. Once you're 22 and you're considered an experienced driver, then you're allowed to have a little bit, very limited amount of alcohol before getting behind the wheel. The purpose for this is you're young, you're going to drive. Don't throw alcohol and drugs in the mix. If you are someone that is drinking and then you decide to drive, on the first offense, the first time you're caught and pulled over, you have an immediate 60-day license suspension. So right where you're pulled over, the police enter it into the system, 60 days, no license. Then 3 days roadside vehicle impoundment. That means whatever vehicle you're driving is being taken away. This can get exceptionally frustrating if it's not your car. If you're just the more sober of all of your friends and you decided to drive your friend's car, then your friend's car is about to get impounded. If you're just 16 years old and you share your parents' car and you're drinking and you decide to drive and you get caught, then your parents' car is being impounded. You have to pay a daily storage fee, you have to pay a towing fee, and you have to pay a release fee to get that car out of impoundment. And guess who has to pay that? The owner. I don't think your friend's parents or your parents would be very happy with that. The last consequence is that you have to do a DWI, driving without impairment course, within 120 days. So even though you get your license back after 60 days, if you don't do this course within the 120 days from when you were pulled over, your license is going to be suspended again. So really important, you avoid this situation at all costs and make proper decisions. SGI has the ability to look back in your driving record 10 years. With that, you could get pulled over when you're 16 years old, and then you could get pulled over when you're 19 years old and you're still considered a new driver. Therefore, you would be charged with a second offense, and the consequences are a lot more severe. Distracted driving. We're almost done. When it comes to distracted driving, as a new driver, you're not allowed to use Bluetooth. Like we said with Impaired, concentrate on the road. It's already complicated being a driver on a good day, let alone when we put different distractions. Distracted driving means that you cannot hold, use, touch, or manipulate an electronic device. It's not just cell phones. You're not allowed to use iPads, laptops, or GPS while you're driving. And yes, I've seen all of those things. Specifically with cell phones, when you're sending a text message, you're 23 times more likely to get into a collision. 23 times more likely for one text message. When you're driving, you're using 4 parts of your brain. Cognitive for thought process, physical because you're steering, auditory for listening, and visual for looking. Those 4 streams of your brain are being used just to drive. When you use something like a cell phone, you're also taking away from those 4 streams of the brain, because I'm thinking about my text message, I'm holding my phone, I'm typing to reply, I'm listening for the response, that notification that we just can't ignore, and I'm reading the text messages. Even someone that is really good at multitasking might have a challenge doing this consistently. When you are caught distracted driving, you get a $580 ticket and you lose 4 demerit points. If we all start at 0, we have to pay SGI $50 per negative demerit point when we are in the negative field. So that means if I'm at -4 now, I have to pay SGI $200 plus my $580 ticket. That means I'm coughing up $780. I might as well just buy a new cell phone. Without due care and attention. A lot of people get confused if they're allowed to eat a burger or drink water while they are driving, and in Saskatchewan, you are allowed to. Distracted driving only deals with electronic devices in our province. But if you're eating a burger and it causes you to drive all crazy and you're sliding into the next lane, then you would get a ticket for without due care and attention. The consequences of without due care and attention are the same as distracted driving, but the ticket is just called something a little bit different. Now, you're not technically qualified to drive. However, impaired and distracted driving are 2 of the most common issues that our teen drivers have to face. Since you already understand a little bit of the rules and the consequences, you're ahead of the game. Although I'm not physically in front of you and you can't ask me questions, if you have any questions, go to our SGI website or ask an adult. I'm sure you have lots of experienced drivers in your family and they'll be able to point you in the right direction. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me talk to you about road safety, and take care out there.